And now we move on to the next presentation. And this is, we have the presenter here with us in Bonn. I would like to invite Akshay Verma, who worked on the ESoC project with the title CliMetLab Web Applications. The mentors for this project were Florian Pinault and Baudouin Raoult, and Florian is also with us today. And again, Florian will give a first introduction on the motivation of the project, and then Akshay can share with us what he has been doing for the past 4 months.
So yeah, this project is related to CliMetLab, and the idea is to have a web interface for CliMetLab. CliMetLab is a Python package, so written in Python, relying on Python packages, and targeting people using Python, using Jupyter notebooks. So we have this great opportunity to make a link with JavaScript, CSS, HTML, Word with Python, and it implies some technical decision too. So in this project, we set the layout, the architecture to have a sort of dashboard for CliMetLab for the users, a local dashboard to interact with the CliMetLab cache. I won't give too much detail on CliMetLab. I'll give more presentation on this. But this is a great job, and one big part of the job was also to explain to us how we would work on this, how we would improve this first set of dashboard from this architecture, having a clear way to implement more things into this dashboard. That was a big achievement also. So thank you very much. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, hello everyone. My name is Akshaj. And as Florian introduced the project, I'm gonna take you through the things that I did. So I'm gonna talk about the problem and the solution that Florian already talked about. So we won't spend a lot of time there. And then I'll talk a little about the architecture, how we planned and designed this entire project, the kind of UI that we designed, how does the front end and the back end work, a brief overview, and then finally some GIFs. Yes, it's GIFs for the demonstration. So as Florian already talked about this, the CliMetLab's current settings are configured by the terminal. And we wanted users who are not well versed with the terminal to be able to do things themselves. Therefore, a GUI. So this is basically a web application that will run locally on a user's PC, something that's easily downloadable as a Python package. And this makes sense for CliMetLab because a user would mostly be doing repetitive tasks such as view the cache files or delete them, search for them. And those are much more easily, in my opinion, accomplished via point and clicky as opposed to typey. So this is a system architecture. Because we wanted this to be just a Python project, we did not want the user to have any JavaScript dependency. They should not have to install a node server, for instance. So we created this front end, and then we created the build output, which is just your CSS, JavaScript, and the HTML files. And we copied them into the build output, which lives inside your Python package where Flask is. So when a user downloads this package from pip, they would actually also be installing the JavaScript, the HTML, the CSS files. Yeah, and then basically that interfaces with the CliMetLab that's installed on their systems, and that's how the users use it. All right, so we had to come up with the features that we wanted a user to have. So in this first iteration, we focused on the 3 major verticals that you see in blue. That is the cache, the stats page, and the settings page. So the cache page has, so I'm going to start with the settings page. The settings page has a single table where you can edit it and configure, for example, if you want to change the cache directory, where are files stored on your PC. So that is a page for that. The stats page that shows you how many cache files are there on your PC and what's the total file size, etc. And finally, the cache page. That's the most involved page. So that's got like two different features. One that you use to inspect the cache, and the other that you use to manage the cache. Inspection involves filtering the files, searching for them, previewing them, while management involves deletion or setting the auto deletion policy. All right, so this is a few slides just to show you what the UI looks like. So this is the main page. This is the cache page where you can, on the top, you can see 6 inputs where you can search for the files or filter them. The header is collapsible. And if you select one of these files on the checkbox on the left, only then the delete button shows up. So like a little nice things for the users. This is the stats page, and here you can see 3 cards. This can easily be extended to how many ever cards you want to show, and they will automatically arrange themselves in a row. So this currently shows the number of files on my PC and the total file size. These are demo files. 764 bytes is too smaller file size. And finally, the settings page, where you can edit the settings. So this is how it basically looks like. Key value pairs, could be strings, could be booleans, and you basically modify them. All right, so let's talk about the backend first. So most of the things in CliMetLab script web are handled by CliMetLab itself. That's a dependency. So the backend in this application mostly just receives the input from the front end and then processes it and sends it back to CliMetLab to actually do the heavy lifting. So the first major functionality is the filter functionality. And so we get the JSON data from the front end and we send it to this matcher class in CliMetLab. And basically that allows us to search for any text. We can filter by file size. So it could be larger than 100 gigabytes, 100 megabytes. And that's by the small letter that you see, the G and the K, etc. And then you can also search for files based on when they were downloaded. For instance, 1 hour, 1 day, 1 minute, 1 second. And this is an overview of the API routes that we have. The routes of the front end, and then we have 4 different APIs for the cache, and then 1 final for the settings page. This is the front end. So the front end was built in mind so that it can be modular and easy to extend and add new features later on. So we have global components that are used throughout the app without any change. We also have local components that sometimes can import the global components, modify them, and then can be used in their respective pages. And we have reusable hooks that we will see, for example, in the dropdown that we use. All right, so this is a small part of the file structure that I have. So I just wanted to show you how we have 3 pages: the cache, the settings, and the stats. And if you can see, there's like a components folder in each of those files. But then in the middle, there's a global components folder as well that lives on the same level as the pages folder. So mostly we import from here and then use it in the respective pages. And we have reusable hooks. So for example, the use click outside, that is used to close a dropdown if you click outside the dropdown. And that's like a very global thing. So I have it as a global hook. And hook is just like a function, nothing fancy. All right, so here is the front end. This is the cache page. And the next few slides will just demonstrate how the local components and the global components kind of interact together. So if you see the thing that's highlighted on the top, that's the nav bar, and that's a global component because it's used in every page. Same position, same data, same style. This is the header form. So this is a local component because it's used only in the cache page, in the sense the content behind it. These inputs, they're again local components because very specific to this page. But this, the actual input which takes and updates the state, that's a global component because that's how most input functions. They change they take some input, change the internal state, and then spit it out. So this is an interesting component because it actually uses a global dropdown component, modifies it for use for this particular input. And we will see this dropdown being used again in a different setting. Yes, this is a table again, uses a global table component that kind of defines the styling behind it. For example, the blue lines that you see for rows, how the headers are bolded out, the font size, margins, paddings, etc. So when you're adding a new feature, you don't really have to worry about all of that. That's taken care of. And yeah, so this is the second modification of the global dropdown component. Again, so the global component itself takes care of everything. You just change the content in it wherever you want to use it. All right, and finally for this page, how we fetch the data. So this is the parent component that loads the entire page. And we basically start out with initializing a state that's empty at first. Then we use Axios to send a request to the backend. Backend sends it to CliMetLab. CliMetLab sends it back to the backend, and then we get the response, set the state. And then we pass this state to its child components based on what we think they would want to do. For example, the header form would only ever set the state. It will never display the state. So we pass it the set cache data function so that it can modify the state. But the cache table, which is at the very bottom, that would display the data, obviously. So we have the state. But because if you remember, there were checkboxes to delete it. So it will also kind of modify the state. So we pass it the set cache data function. And that's basically the cache page. There's just one thing different about this than the other two pages is we don't simply set the state, so to speak. We modify it a little bit just to add space for the checked functionality. We need to track which boxes are checked, which boxes are not checked. And that's what happens in the Axios request, the second line. All right, so the next two components would be settings and stats, very simple compared to the cache page. So here again, the table component from the cache page, if you remember it, there's a global component and there's a local component, easy peasy. And this also works very similar, except we're not modifying the state in any way. We just get it from the backend, we set it, we use it. The same for this, except it's got even less dependency on the global components. Just one stats box that again receives the data from the front end, set it, and voila. All right, so now to the final part of my presentation, where I'm going to show you a demo, GIFs, yes, GIFs. So this is how the search functionality looks like. You enter some search terms, you set what file size, for instance, you want to search within. And all of these, even if a file type is empty, it just goes as empty and then you can search for it. This shows you the cache page. So if you click on the delete button, only then, one of the checkboxes, only then will the delete button show up. This is the cache page still. This is the stats page. I'm demonstrating the toggling of the header. And this is the settings page finally. You can edit the settings and then save it. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. And finally, so I've designed this entire web app, keeping the responsiveness in mind. So you can kind of use it on your phone. I don't know why anybody would want to, but then there's an option. Yeah, so it changes according to the screen size. So I've designed it for like a phone, an iPad, something bigger like a laptop, and maybe even bigger like this TV screen, but let's not test that. All right, so that was my presentation. Thank you all for listening.